Welcome to the Greater Culture Podcast, where movement, mindset, and mastery meet. Join us as we explore the art of living fully with expert guests and real-life stories to inspire your journey. And welcome to another episode of the Greater Culture Podcast with your host, Brad Marshall. Today, excited to be joined by Max Isaak, someone I've been following for some time. He's been in the CrossFit space, owner of CrossFit Tilt, and you maybe have heard him on podcasts like The Intro. Has a chance to work with Best Hour of Their Day. We got a chance to connect at the Affiliate Owner Summit recently, and we're chopping it up there. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about his story today and how he got into fitness and all that good stuff. So Max, thanks for jumping on today.
Brad, I appreciate you being here. I'm psyched to chop it up with you and see where the conversation takes us.
Yeah, I always like to hear from folks what their origin story is like, because looking at you now of having multiple gyms, helping coaches and owners figure out ways to navigate the CrossFit space, where did your origin story begin when it comes to health and fitness and coaching and all that?
For sure. So, lifting for me started when I was pretty young, 13, 14 years old. I actually started at the gym at my high school as a freshman. So I can vividly remember finding a pair of lifting gloves in the Lost and Found, going to the only machine that I've ever seen anybody use, which was that kind of like chest fly machine, and start like doing reps there. And my best friend Dave Sluss, who's one of the owners of Bear Republic in San Diego, came and found me. He's like, "So what are you doing?" I'm like, I have no clue. I'm just like doing reps. I saw people doing this. Like I thought like this is what you did. He's like, "Hey, so listen, meet me tomorrow after school at the Hayden Recreation Center. Bring $25. That's what it costs for a year membership to this gym." And which is amazing, right? $25 for a year. And I'm gonna put you on to like a program. And the first program that we ever did was the Super Squats program, so which was the 20 rep squat 3 times a week. And so that was my first exposure to weightlifting, and I did that program for like 3 years. And so I can remember the first time doing it, empty barbell, 20 reps, and it like ruined me. And in that program, they also have like 3 sets of like max grip pull-ups. And I can remember like my first time doing a pull-up, I could do like 3 total reps of like barely bending my elbows. Like I can remember both of these moments and being like, how does anybody even do a pull-up? And so that was my first exposure to weightlifting, and that really set it off for me. So I'm going to turn 39 actually this Saturday. So I've been, working out for 25, 26 years. My first exposure to CrossFit was actually through Groupon. So I was a kindergarten teacher. I would teach kindergarten and then work at an after-school program. And our after-school director one day, me and another one of my good buddies, Nick, was like, "Hey, there's this thing called Groupon, there's a Groupon for a thing called CrossFit." And we were in Natick at the time. And it was $50 for a 1-month membership in this thing called Elements. And we had no clue about anything, but it was at CrossFit New England. So we went there, we did the Groupon, we went through Elements. And at the end of Elements, I told MDV, who we actually ended up doing the intro together. He was my first coach, my first Elements coach. I was like, I think I will probably add this into like my weekly routine. Like, I think I'll do it like maybe once or twice a week. And he's like, "I could guarantee that you'll be coaching here in the next couple months." And I was like, "We'll see." And in the next couple months, I was volunteering for the kids class. So those are kind of the two different origin stories for me.
Yeah, when you think back to finding those lifting gloves and jumping into that gym, was there any sort of motivation behind wanting to test this out and figure out what these movements are and what working out was all about? And what was the driver for you back then?
Yeah, I was an angsty teen. I like truly at the time, I needed something that would be a little bit more positive in my life, like sad, angry, depressed, 13, 14-year-old kid who on the family side had been through a whole lot. At that time was also like smoking weed all the time, smoking cigarettes. Like I had too much freedom. I was doing like all of these things. Now, granted, I didn't stop doing that when I got into lifting, but it was one of these things that was like, oh, okay, like this is a real positive thing in my life. It ended up, it was kind of interesting. The rec center that we were a part of, the gym was in the basement, and it was like a gym from the 70s. Like everything was completely rusted out. Like if you wore a t-shirt that you liked, you weren't going to wear it outside anymore because there was a rust stain across the back from where you back squatted. But what we ended up doing was we ended up putting like a ton of kids onto the 20 rep squat program. We like it just kind of grew. Like it was one of these like really organic things where, kids would want to get into lifting. They'd be like, hey, meet us at the Hayden Recreation Center, bring $25 and like we'll put you onto the 20 rep squat program. It was really cool. I can remember we had two CDs. We had a Metallica mix and we had a Rage mix, and that was it. You just kind of flip flop between the two. So
I think it's always fascinating to hear what gets people into movement and lifting. And for some, it's athletics and wanting to improve in that specific sport. For others, it's maybe they got bullied as a kid or things weren't going the way they wanted in life outside of the gym. And then they look to the gym as sort of that positive influence. What was the guiding factor to get you to go to the gym out of all the other potential positive things you could have engaged with? Because I'm imagining you're probably not surrounded with a whole lot of folks who are like lifting and healthy and fit. And you're like, I want to look like that person. So was it just
yeah.
something that you were like, hey, I think this thing could be the one that helps me out here?
Yeah, I can remember seeing like a couple of other kids that were lifting at the time, and I was like, oh damn, like I mean, looks like they're strong, like that. Like I think it was just something that's like, oh, I think I'd really like to do this. I had played sports kind of all growing up. Like I played baseball for a while. I dabbled in other sports, but then like I got to high school, and to be quite honest with you, like I went to high school and it was like an open campus. So it was one of these things where there were all these different buildings. You had study halls, but like upperclassmen had free blocks. And so I just started like skipping class. Like I would just like, oh, I have a study hall. Like I'll just skip. I just didn't go to my study halls. And then I rolled into like, oh, I'm just like not going to class anymore. And so, I mean, there was a lot more that went into it, but lifting and being involved in health, wellness, and fitness has been an increasingly large part of my life that's, I think, led me to where I'm at today, which is like you can change people's lives through working out, because my life has been forever changed by that.
Yeah, I think when people start to experience some of the benefits, not just the physical ones, but some of the mental ones, some of the ways it impacts their social and their community circles, they start to realize, ooh, this is pretty cool. As you started to progress through some of those formative years, high school, college, you mentioned being a teacher. What role did fitness play in that? Was it just kind of the thing you did outside of school, outside of work? Or what did
No,
that look like?
so in high school, like I said, I got into lifting pretty early, like freshman year, but then I just continued to kind of mess around and not take school seriously. My mother, so grew up in a single family household. My mother's working, going back to school, get her master's, and again, like I had too much free time. So by the time my first senior year rolled around, my administrator at the time kind of pulled me aside and gave me like three options. He was like, so listen, you're not going to graduate this year, which is unheard of. I went to Lexington High School. Like people are going to Harvard, MIT, they're going to Ivy League schools. Nobody essentially is given these three options. He's like, I think you should either drop out right now and join the military. I think you should drop out right now, get your GED and start working or doing whatever. Or like if you commit to coming back for a fifth year, I'm going to give you like a number of essentially like non-negotiables. So one of the non-negotiables was I had to meet with him every morning before school. So I was skipping a lot of school at the time. I was getting high before going to school. And so he's like, you need to come meet with me every single morning before school, half an hour before school, meet me in the office, and like, we'll chop it up about whatever. So that was one. The second thing was they were no longer going to suspend me. So any class that I skipped, the next time they saw me, I had an in-school suspension, because essentially they were suspending me and I was just like taking vacation days. And then the third thing was he was like, you need to play football. And I had never played football before in my life. And so if you can imagine a fifth year senior going out to play football for the first time, I was like the worst football player in the world. There was nobody worse than me. The only thing that I had going for me was I'd been lifting for like 4 years straight. And also I'd been doing like, I'd started like doing conditioning stuff for some reason. There's this massive hill and like I'd run it all the time. I had no clue what I was doing. Right. So I went in for essentially like, you do a bunch of testing for football, like in my fifth year. So I agreed to all the terms. I go back and like I do all the testing and I like test off the charts physically for all the stuff. I go out there and put pads on for the first time, and yeah, it's like you would expect, just like the absolute most uncoordinated, worst football player you'd ever seen. And so I ended up playing football my 5th year, and then I ended up transferring to a junior college, which again, kind of unheard of, and playing football there, and then transferring to a 4-year school. So I'm not sure what the original question was, Brad, but this weightlifting unlocked a number of opportunities for me that when I was ready to essentially accept responsibility for my actions helped me immensely. And so my administrator, Aaron Sanders Jr., also demonstrated for me that like one person can like save somebody's life. And I've believed that ever since, because it really took one person to help me turn around what I had going.
Yeah, I mean, I can already start to see some of these threads that most likely will get pulled through around, like you said, having somebody who is in your corner, a coach, supporter, whatever, and is going to hold you accountable to some of those actions. Because just because you walk into a gym, just because you start moving around and working out, doesn't mean life's going to get completely better overnight. It's
Right.
still a whole lot of other things involved there. So having someone in your corner, really, really helpful. Having some healthy outlets, also helpful. And then you mentioned that, you went into teaching. So how did you go from figuring out 5th year, okay, got that done, and then going into teaching? That's a very interesting jump there, especially as somebody who struggled with education.
Oh, totally. Teaching for me was, I think at a really early age, I was a camp counselor. That was like the thing that I loved to do. So the Hayden Rec Center, the place that I lifted at, I used to go to camp there. I became a camp counselor there. I became the rec director there. And then when I transferred to UMass Amherst, which was the 4-year school that I went to, I had to get a job. And I looked at like all the campus jobs, and they're all like working at the dining hall or like checking IDs. But then there was an on campus preschool, and I'd worked with kids like my whole life. And at this point, in my life, I've kind of turned things around. I had done all the partying when I was in high school. So by the time I got to college, I was still doing the normal college thing, like, you have a drink here or there, but I was not like going crazy. So I was like, you know what? Like, I'm going to apply to the preschool. So I worked at the preschool at UMass Amherst for, a handful of years until I graduated. And then when I moved back to Mass, I initially wanted to get into teaching high school English because I loved reading, and that was my major in college. I was an English major. And so I went through this program called the Boston Teacher Residency Program. And it's the way that it works is you apply to be a part of this program. They take like the top 1,000 applicants, and they come in, you do like a full day, and they whittle it down to like 500 to 250 to 150 until there's like 50 left. And I think it's the last 50 end up getting hired for the Boston Public Schools, and then they get their master's for free through UMass Boston. And so I ended up making it to like the final round, didn't end up getting it. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So I was like, I'm just going to apply to essentially schools in the area, and I got hired to teach kindergarten. And that was my first experience, was like, I'm a kindergarten teacher at a private school in Natick. And it was, a class of 9 students. And it was amazing for the 2 years that I did it. When you have 9 kids, those kids so well. And I was able to create a really wonderful community in our class, and the kids loved each other, and we had a great time. But to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't really love teaching some of the academic side. You may think like kindergarten math is like the easiest thing in the world, but like, hey, I mean, kindergarten math can still be tough, and I didn't love teaching it. And at that time, that's when I started getting involved in CrossFit. I had an opportunity to volunteer for the kids class. So that's actually how I got started teaching and then transitioning into coaching.
Yeah, that sounds like a much more manageable group number to handle, because we have some teachers who go to our gym and they'll teach young kids and they'll have 20, 25 kids in a class, sometimes without an assistant. And I don't understand how that's possible to wrangle that many kids.
Yeah, they're like the best group managers in the world. They'd probably be the best coaches for
They
you
probably
ever.
would, yeah. And I imagine the skill sets that you learn throughout college and then in some of those early days of figuring out how do I manage kids and keep it fun, keep it interactive, certainly pull through into CrossFit. So it sounds like education was, all right, this is something I think I can do, enjoy it, step into a CrossFit gym. you decide this is something I enjoy doing for myself personally. What were some of those early experiences that you were like, okay, I'm taking this Groupon and I'm going to turn it into just my typical way of working out or doing fitness?
To be honest with you, it's the same stuff that I love, 12 years later. Being able to step into a gym with a group of like-minded people that are essentially all working towards the same thing. I love being a part of a team. Like, I love it. I'm just such a firm believer that you can probably do some things on your own. It's probably less fun, and it's probably pretty untrue that, people that are successful do things by themselves. I think successful people do things with other people all the time. I think that's just how it goes. So I love being part of a team, and that's what I felt like immediately when I started taking class. I also love the fact that it was 60 minutes. It was like, hey, this is the thing that you're doing today. We're going to walk you through the whole thing. And the other part was 12 years ago, or however long it was when I started at CrossFit New England. I mean, it was like an insane vibe. This, what Ben created early on at CFNE was something really, really special. It also, when I came in there, I came in like during the open. Like, I think that was like within the first couple months. So I saw everybody do the open. I was like, whoa. I'm like, okay, so everybody competes in this thing. I immediately thought like, oh, okay, so like you do CrossFit, but then like everybody's like a competitor. And at that point, there was not a huge gap. Like, there wasn't, right? Like, quote unquote, normal people were competing in the sport of CrossFit. Like, normal with quotation marks, right? Like, there's a little more to it, but I like immediately leaned into that. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I wanna, like, now I want to compete. So like, I want to do the team thing. And so that was early on, that just became a really huge goal for me.
Yeah. And it's interesting to hear what gets people into CrossFit and then how some of those motivations change over time. So for you, fitness, but then also got into the competitive side. So in those early years when you started to look at it from a more competitive lens, what did it look like? What sort of role did CrossFit play in your life, or things that you had to do or change? Or was it simply I just did my hour class, I did my job, and I was able to try and push myself to compete at, whatever level you were striving for?
So right around this time was when I was transitioning from being essentially a full-time teacher into trying to do CrossFit full-time. So this transition period essentially happened. Like, I started volunteering for the kids class. I got hired for the kids class. And so my life kind of became, I would like teach all day. I would go to the gym, I'd teach the kids class, and then like I'd train. And then like I started ramping up the coaching side. So me and my good buddy Jeff started a high school program. We started a middle school program. I started teaching elements. I started teaching adults. And so then it became like, okay, I'm now essentially like working like 7 to 3 at the school. And then I'm like 3:30 to 8:30 at the gym. And this was like, so to answer your question, it was like all encompassing, like my day was like 14 hours, but you're 20 something years old. It was like, it was electric. I like loved every second of what we were doing. Then I transitioned to being a full-time coach, and training really looked like a lot. We were all taking class. And then Ben was, Ben was the originator, right? It was like Ben, Rudy, Jay from Milford. It was, back then, I forget, CJ from Invictus. These were like the programs that were out there, right? So Ben was one of the originators of like a competitors program, and we were just kind of like the test subjects, right? Like, Ben dropped this thing, like we were talking about yesterday, this thing called like the Get Huge program. And Ben was this believer that like, hey, we're going to take like some principles from West Side, right? And we're going to apply it to what we're doing. We're not going to have any Metcon. Like, you're going to box squat, 500 pounds. You probably can't run 400 meters, but we'll ramp up the conditioning. And like, so like, we did what Ben said. We got fit, we got strong. And so that was it. Like, like, in Ben we trust, and it worked. Like, I went from, a 13.5 minute grace to, doing whatever. It culminated with like being able to compete on a regional team. We were like one spot away from making the games. And to be honest with you, right when that happened was when I was getting into opening my first gym. And then I was like, cool, done competing. Like, and I was competing at a low level. Like, there was no aspiration for me to be a games athlete or anything like this. It was the group. And that's the thing that I've realized the most of what I love. It's like I just love the people that I'm with. And if the people that I'm with we're doing this thing and we're trying to compete, like that's cool. But like now I have a 5:15 class that I train with every day, and I'm having just as much fun training with them 60 minutes a day, as I was 10 years ago, 12 years ago, trying to work towards something bigger. So
Yeah, and I get the sense that you're somebody who loves to push yourself, not only physically with CrossFit and challenging yourself there, but also from a work standpoint, because not that many people would say, oh, I love this thing so much that I'm going to do my day job. Then I'm going to go work another 5 hours to see how I can potentially grow this thing and then figure out what's the next strategy for maybe making it full time. Did you always feel like you had sort of an entrepreneurial spirit of figuring out ways? Because I think for some coaches, they look at, okay, I get my L1. How do I just coach more at my gym and get to a spot where maybe I can have full-time hours or if the gym allows it? But to go out and actually find schools and different programs that you could lead and run, I think that's a different type of mindset for folks who are getting into coaching to make it work. So did you feel like you always kind of had that entrepreneurial mindset, especially in those early days of CrossFit and coaching and getting into it?
I actually never thought of myself as an entrepreneur at all. I grew up pretty poor with like the standard of living that people were at in Lexington, right? Like again, I never felt like personally we were lacking anything, but it was just very apparent that hey, everybody else that I'm hanging out with at school has just like an infinite amount more than I do. And because of that, like I said, I go to college. Like I didn't have any money. Like my mom's not sending me to school with an allowance every week. As soon as I got to college, I'm like, oh, all right, got to start working. And before that, I was always working. And so when I got out of college, I didn't have any money. I'm a college, like I'm a broke, college graduate. it it was never like an entrepreneurial thing, but always like, oh, okay, I can work. Like I'm good at working, and I found the things that I'm actually pretty good at and leaned into that. I'm like, oh, this is something that's coming naturally for me. Oh, and now I'm learning from other people that are like way better than me. So early on at CrossFit New England, it's like, you got the Mel Ockerbys, the James Hobarts, the MDVs, the Kevin Montoyas, the Rachel Martinez. Like it was like this who's who of coaching, and we were just all, like honing our craft and getting better together. I mean, shoot, you're under Ben, you're under Heather at the time. So it felt like so natural to want to create, because the other thing was at this time, I mean, that was how Ben managed you. Like we would come to Ben with this idea. Like I can just remember I was reminiscing with my buddy Jeff yesterday. We were like, hey, there's no high school class. We want to start a high school class. Ben's like, okay, cool, go ahead. He's like, go start it. We're like, oh, okay. He's like, listen, it's either gonna like take off or fail. So make it happen. But we really want to make this thing happen. And so we made it happen. And he never really had the idea of starting a gym until I met my now business partner, best friend, and mentor, LJ DiCarlo. And I just used to coach LJ. I used to coach him. He thought I was kind of silly. Like at the time, I used to like listen to a lot of Katy Perry and stuff like that in class. And he thought it was kind of hilarious. And one day on the back patio at CFNE, I'm out there with Jeff, like my number one training partner at the time. And LJ's like, "You ever thought about opening a gym?" We were like, "Oh, well, I mean, kind of, not really." He's like, "Well, if you ever are interested, like, I'd love to do it." You know? And so I was like, "Okay, well, let's explore that." What did I know? Like I knew nothing about business. I was an English major, like education minor. I did a lot of Judaic studies. Like I had no idea about running a business. And so LJ let me buy into our business with sweat equity. I entered into our agreement with very little. I think I remember putting, a couple $1,000s down to help pay for like a sound system in the gym. And then that's how we started. And so it was kind of wild.
I love hearing how the relationships that you cultivated have guided and kind of influenced all the different areas you found yourself, whether it was, some of the education stuff, those early days of your training partners really push you to challenge yourself in the gym to see what we're capable of, finding people in the business space that allow you to grow and develop and figure out who I can be as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. And so when I'm looking at that trajectory, what were some of the things that you learned early on as a coach that maybe helped you be the type of coach you are now? I mean, you mentioned the idea of like you're around this community of just sledgehammers of coaches at that time. There's not nearly as many resources then as there are now for folks to develop their coaching skill sets. But your ability to coach effectively led to a great relationship with LJ, which led to trust that you could do this thing. So what was it like developing as a coach in those early years, making that transition from education to now leading groups of people through a 60-minute fitness class?
I mean, just sucking so bad in the beginning. You know, Mel Ockerby took me through my coaching on ramp, and she's an absolute beast of a coach. But what it really was observing everybody else and understanding that while I'm able to take things and see what people are doing, I need to lean into like what my style is and who I am as a coach. The hardest thing as a young coach is to be authentically yourself while also following a timeline and a schedule of what needs to happen. Early on, it's very hard to do that. It's incredibly hard to let your personality come through because you're fumbling through a general warm up, a specific warm up, and all this other stuff, right? So the thing that I had going for me was I'd already been writing lesson plans for years when I was teaching. Now, thrusters and pull ups is different than ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, but it's like there's still a common thread. So that part to me was actually pretty easy. Like, oh, okay, I know how to do a timeline because I'm literally doing that. The other thing that I learned really early on from teaching young people is that young people need to be moving, and they need to be moving from thing to thing, and they can't be doing one thing for too long. And adults are the exact same way. And when I watch an adult class, when people are doing the same thing for too long, it's incredibly boring. Nobody's having a good time and nobody's doing anything. So I knew people needed to move around. Also, I know the effect of actually putting on a show, right? Inspire, right? Educate and entertain. So I was really good at entertaining early on. In fact, this was the thing that I thought was like my best quality and then quickly turned into like my worst, right? Because while you can be a great entertainer, if your whole thing is just a stand-up comedy routine, you're not actually meeting everybody where they're at, right? And it also becomes a little shticky, a little corny. So early on, I found that I was really great at entertaining people and I could give people like the most entertaining hour. But then I really had to get better at seeing, correcting, like all these other things that I was lacking at. And that was great because I was watching other coaches do it at a really high level. So my first class coach was James Hobart for 7:30 p.m. And he was my 7:30 p.m. coach. And I would take his class and I'd be like, wow, all right, this is like what a master looks like. He's able to do it all, right? Educate, inspire, and entertain. So early on, to answer your question, Brad, I just took every single opportunity that I could to observe class, to take class, and to be involved in anything that Ben was doing. At the time, Ben was running this box seminar, which was early on educating box owners on how to run an amazing business, all this other stuff. And I volunteered for every single one. Whenever there was anything that was going on outside the gym that Ben was doing, I was like, I want to be there. So I just dove into the deep end. I'm like, what do I have to lose? Like I'm around amazing people. Like now let me just soak in all the information.
Yeah, I think when you start looking at how to get better at whatever the skill set is, surrounding yourself with an environment that pushes you will cause you to grow so much faster. So I think for coaches, anytime you can get around other people who are coaching at a high level, it just raises your game so much so quickly. And the other aspect that I love that you highlighted too was the desire to want to get better, but also kind of knowing what strengths and weaknesses are and figuring out how do I intentionally go about improving these weaknesses, whether it's seeing and correcting or taming the authenticity of like being the entertainer throughout the course of an hour, because that's so important as well. When you started to make that transition from education to coaching, how many classes were you able to coach then? Because I think the more you get reps at this thing, obviously the quicker you can get better at it. Was this like I'm coaching 10 plus classes a week and I'm really dialing it in? Or was this sort of a progression? Because I think for some coaches out there, especially if they're part-time, they don't get a ton of reps at it. They might get 3 to 5 reps a week. As you progress or it becomes more of your full-time thing, you start to get 10, 12, 15 chances at this thing a week. So what did that look like for you of learning, being involved in the environment, and then figuring out how do I just keep getting reps to get better at this thing?
It was kind of crazy. I quit teaching when Ben offered me a full-time job. And when Ben offered me a full-time job, I was coaching 3 or 4 classes a day. So I'm getting, what is that? 15 to 20 classes a week, crushing. And we're a couple months in, and Ben comes up to me. He's like, listen, there's just not enough work for you to do. Meaning like, hey, you're doing the coaching, but like the other work, there's not enough. And so we're going to bump you down to part-time. So I went from being a full-time coach to coaching to 7:30 p.m. 4 times a week. So I was doing 15 to 20 classes to 4. So a lot of things happened right then. If this is me in high school, I would have stormed out, walked out, flipped them off, never come back. So thank God I'd grown up. So a couple things started to happen. One, I was like, okay, how am I going to live? Like now I need to figure out like financially, how am I going to live? Because I was on salary, and now I'm essentially getting paid, what was it, 20, 25 bucks a class. I might be making 500, 600 bucks a month. So I wasn't getting a ton of reps. Coaching 7:30 p.m. He decided to go back into education. I'm now working at middle school, where I developed essentially PE curriculum for high school, middle school kids at a progressive high school, middle school that had formed from the elementary school that I worked at. Had made a great connection with the founder of the school, and he hired me on the spot. At that time, I had also taken on my first private training client. I'd never done private training before. I ended up building out a private training practice where I was going to people's houses, training them at their houses. If they didn't have a gym, I was building them a gym. This kind of all happened. So I was getting tons of reps doing everything. I was back to teaching kids. I was back to doing private training, which helped me work one-on-one with people. I would take every opportunity to coach at CF, and it was kind of all stuck together with glue and mud and all these things, and then that was it. So I was doing that until I started my gym.
That's really fascinating. I didn't realize that part of the journey, where it seems like you're on this trajectory, getting the full-time pay, just CrossFit's the thing now, and it's always going to be the thing. And then there's those bumps in the road where it's like, I guess we're changing direction and changing course and sticking with it. And then that makes a lot more sense than when you got an opportunity to connect with your business partner and presented to you with this idea that well, yeah, I'm not full-time, but maybe I'd like to make it full-time. So what was that process like? Because I think certain coaches, myself included, we all go through that of you're involved in CrossFit, you become a coach, you really love it, you love the community, and then there starts to be that little bit of an idea, or somebody brings it to you of an idea of what would it look like if we started this or started my own gym or box, whatever you want to call it. So what was that process like? Because it sounded like it caught you a little off guard and surprised you, but then the thought became much more real and you're like, let's pursue this thing.
Yeah. So I've been before LJ had really presented it to me. I had a couple people in my life that had asked, hey, if you ever decide to open a gym, I'll invest in you. They're just amazing people in that whole atmosphere at CrossFit New England. My first private client, who I still have a relationship with 12 years later, had approached me and essentially offered to give me a personal loan. I don't know what to do with that much money. And so nothing had ever felt right until I met LJ, because I knew that his strengths were my weaknesses, and I knew that my strengths were his weaknesses. He couldn't start a gym without me. That's the thing I actually knew how to do, was how to coach people, but also how to build a community. I felt really, really good about that. I had done that a number of times. So when we decided on it, the first thing we actually did once we solidified the whole plan was brought it to Ben. And the reason we did that was I had seen, I think over 20 gyms have been started out of CrossFit New England. And what I had seen is everybody waits till about 2 weeks before their gym opens to tell Ben that they're leaving. I'm not going to say I'm the best person in the world, because I've certainly, God, when I was younger, done my fair share of not so great things. But I also recognize when people have really done a lot for me. And Ben had done a ton for me, right? Like this is the person that gave me a start, gave me opportunities, had changed my life, right? Actually changed my life. Another one of these people, right? So now it had been Aaron Sanders, Ben Bergeron. Like I've been really lucky to have really strong men in my life that have filled a huge void for me. So we brought it to Ben. And we're like, hey, listen, we're going to start a gym. We're so far out. We're so far out from doing this, but we want to bring it to you first because if it's a conflict of interest, like I understand if I have to leave. And Ben was like, hey, nobody's ever done this. Like, actually, everybody just waits for those 2 weeks. They tell me that they're leaving. And I mean, listen, man, Ben's like Mr. Consistent. He wishes everybody well. It's the greatest compliment in the world that you've changed somebody's life and they want to go out and change more. But he's like, nobody's ever done this. I want to be involved. So I want to be involved in what you guys are doing. And so for us, it was a no-brainer. You know, here's another person that has a unique skill set that can do things that we can't do, can bring visibility to the business. At that point, Ben had a relationship with Pure Strength, which was like equipment company at the time. We ended up, using his connection there to help outfit our first gym, and that was it. Like we were off and running. That was how Tilt started, and from there we set off on this journey of building a gym.
I love that, the opportunity to collaborate and bring it to Ben. And I love that there's support there as well, like within the CrossFit community, of encouraging other people to bring more opportunities for people to get fit, healthy, happier. And I'm interested then, when you started to think about, okay, we want to build this gym, you mentioned some of your strengths around building community, and obviously being able to coach was really helpful. You had some financial help there, which is helpful. What were some of the big things for you when you started to think about building a gym? Did you think about this idea of building a brand and like, what is our mission and what are our values? What do we stand for? Was it like, I just want to get the doors open so we can just start coaching 60-minute classes and we'll figure all that stuff out later? How did you go about starting and building your gym in that way?
To be honest, I didn't think about any of that stuff. I was like, I know what my, like, essentially like what my beliefs are about working out. And because my life has been forever changed by fitness. So I felt really, really confident that with me leading the gym, I was going to pull the right people in there that wanted to be a part of whatever this was. And it wasn't really well defined. We did CrossFit. That was the thing that we did. I coached all the classes, so I knew exactly what they were going to get, which was me, and that first year was like an absolute blur. We opened with 125 members. We did a pre-sale. We sold all of our memberships. We opened with 125 people, and day one, I coached a 5:30 class with like 15 people in. And that was it. We were kind of like just off and running, and I didn't know anything. I don't know if I told you this story, but like I've told it many times where we're a couple months into the business and the gym is like packed full, and LJ pulls me aside and he's like, hey, nobody has a membership here. He's like, everybody's just like working out, like they love it, but like you haven't signed anybody up. Like they're all just kind of like working out for free, or maybe like a couple people had the memberships. And so I was like, oh shit, all right, so you got to do that. I just like, I didn't know, I didn't have any business experience, and not that we lucked out, but like we were just putting out an amazing product. Like the class itself was great because that's the thing that I had worked on for however long. Like I really knew how to do that. So we did it.
I think that's actually hilarious, because I think so many people could relate to that in some way, shape, or form. Of you get into this thing and you're like, all I got to do is coach classes and everything else will take care of itself. And
Yeah.
you realize there's this whole thing of like working in the business and working on the business and all these factors, but building the product, what you were offering to the community, and getting such a huge group at the beginning, that had to be a huge confidence boost, because it is certainly a risk when you're like, I'm putting myself out there. We're going to create this gym, create this brand, and see what happens. What gave you the confidence that you could run that gym and that it would attract the right amount of people and the right type of people that would come for what you were offering?
Yeah, no backup plan and being 100% authentic, like being yourself. I've never had a backup plan in my life. Now listen, granted, like right now, we're in a great spot. There's like Tilt has changed so much, but like here I am, this young guy running a gym. I'm like, this is the thing. There's no other thing that I will do right now. And so 100% of my effort is into this. I do believe 100% in myself and bet on myself time and time again. And that was the beginning of me like really betting on myself. Like I believe I can do this. And I also believe that the people that I have around me, so LJ and Ben are still part of Tilt. And I'll be honest, like LJ, my business partner, like I said, he's like my mentor, like my best friend. He's a father figure to me. He has been so consistent in what he does for Tilt and what he does for me that like I believed in him having my back. But early on, and I remember this conversation like so well. The gym's being built, it's like metal studs, concrete floors, like Ben and LJ sat me down. I'm sitting on like a, upside down Homer bucket or whatever. And they're like, "Hey, so listen, like we're going to build the thing. Like LJ's going to build it. Ben's going to, help us with the equipment. He's going to help us market it, but like this thing's going to either like go or be gone on your shoulders. Like you need to make it happen." And that was like one of the scariest but best conversations in my life because I want the control. Like I want it to be on me. And this is just such a common theme, Brad, but early on, our first employee is now my general manager, Brian Sieber, and he came on with us when he graduated from Springfield College. He was doing some interning at CrossFit New England, and then he came over to like help with the front desk. We've had a number of employees, but there's never been anybody like Brian and the things that he has done and continues to do for our company. So it's like we've been so fortunate to bring the right people on. And when Brian came on for us, we really needed it so badly because it was exposing to me like, oh, these are the things that I'm good at. And man, there's this whole other skill set that like I'm struggling with. So
Yeah, I think what I continue to hear is this theme or this thread of confidence in your ability to do whatever the task is, whether it's teach, whether it's coach, whether it's build a program, whether it's start a gym. People have believed in you. It allows you to have a really strong conviction in what you're capable of. And at the same time, there's still some vulnerability there around there's things I don't know and there's things I need to get better at and want to get better at, and surrounding myself with the people who help do that. And I think that combination is really important because one, like you said, if you're going to start a business, it takes some confidence that you can weather the storms and figure out a way forward. And you're continually trying to get better and improve and continue to surround yourself with the right people. Now, looking at where Tilt started to where it is now, did you ever have the vision or the idea of this is where we can go, this is what we can do, thinking about multiple locations, corporate locations, thinking about new fitness brands or ideas kind of coming off of Tilt, or how did that unfold for you?
never. Our goal was create a really great lifestyle for Max. You have LJ on this podcast. He will tell you that's the thing that he wanted to do for me. He's like, I want to give you an opportunity to have a great lifestyle and a strong business. So that was it. We were like, we're going to do one. And then there was an opportunity for this gym in Sudbury. He brings it to me. He's like, so what do you think? Like we can, we could like buy this gym and then we can renovate it. We can rebrand it. And we're like, yeah, okay, we can, like, yeah, it sounds like we can do it. Like who's going to run it? And then like, well, at that point, Brian had been with us for a while and like he was a strong coach. It's like Brian went and ran it. That was how we started Sudbury. Bought out a gym, rebranded it, renovated it. Like Brian went over there and ran it. I had a couple coaches that were coaching for me. We had some coaches that we could put over there. Like, okay, that was cool. Our first corporate opportunity happened because of a relationship that I have with still one of my really close friends who is the CEO of a company here in Boston, and he wanted Tilt to run a field day. He like this is like the best guy in the world. He like loves fitness in all forms and wants to share it with all of his employees. And so he, at that point, he'd like really like CrossFit. He's like, I want you to create the CrossFit Games. I was like, well, we're not going to do the CrossFit Games, but I'm like, but we can do a field day. I can. One thing that I realized really early on is that like I can actually build like most things, not physically with my hands. I'm terrible, but like I could build most things. Like I'm like, oh, I can actually see how I could structure this and how I could do it. So he asked me, he's like, hey, could you do this field day for us? I'm like, sure, no problem. We'll handle it. And in that same conversation, he's like, I want you to consult on a gym that I'm starting at the business. He talks about, I was like, well, can I submit a bid? He's like, well, it's not a CrossFit gym only. Like there's going to be CrossFit. There's going to be all these other things. And I was like, okay, cool. Tilt wants to expand. Like I want to do this. He's like, great. We have 2 weeks. He's like, we've already got 7 or 8 bids from a number of companies. He's like, so if you can make it, like make the bid. I'd never written a bid before. I'd never done any of this stuff before. This is before ChatGPT. Like, I'm like, okay, so I go back and I pull on a number of strings and people that I know and hey, like how do you even do this thing and work with LG, and we put together this bid and they pick us. It's our first corporate gym. And so that's how Tilt's been built off really strong and real meaningful relationships. I can honestly say that everything that I have professionally, personally, is from building out strong relationships with no motive behind it other than wanting to just know really awesome people. And if there is an opportunity to do something, exploring that.
Do you think of yourself as someone who's really curious and like always asking questions and always getting to know people? Because as I look at some of these threads that have been pulled across, the relationships is a huge component to that. And the ability to build meaningful and trusting relationships is not easy. And it is a skill set, but there's also some authenticity there. So I'm just curious, do you think of yourself as kind of a very curious person who's always asking questions, getting to know people? Is that something that you've built over time, or how do you go about building some of those strong relationships?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. Like, I'm incredibly curious. I love it. It's something that I don't think I probably got better at it because I'm doing it all the time, but it just always is something that's very natural and part of who I am. I love meeting new people. I love learning about other people's lives and like we're doing right now, like chopping it up. It's something that I think a lot of people miss, like or miss out on. And what I've realized early on in my life is things are just always better with other people and other really good people. And it's so much more fun. And I've just always used that to guide me. Like it's something that again I think just came really natural. And then I realized kind of later on in my life and in my professional life, I'm like, oh wow, I'm like, I guess not everybody can do this. Like, it's something that like as I was, like as I'm getting into the business world, it's something that is just part of who I am and that a lot of other people struggle with it. And it's kind of just what my day-to-day life is like. So I feel very lucky.
Yeah, I certainly can hear the traits and characteristics that have made you a great teacher, great coach, great owner, creating culture and creating opportunities for individuals to improve their health and fitness comes from this desire to get to know people, build relationships, be curious, and then just see what's possible, and then having the confidence to execute on that. So I know I've certainly enjoyed getting to know you and your perspectives on the intro and what you've brought to Best Hour now. It's been super fun to see how you're bringing so much information and experiences and thoughtfulness to share with the community so that others can grow as well. And so for anyone out there who's interested in connecting with you or seeing what you're up to at Best Hour, Tilt, or any of those places, what are some of the best ways to connect with you?
Over Instagram, it's Max Isaak. Something just my name. I switch it to that. Tilt, come drop in. We got a lot of gyms in the greater Boston area. And I'll also just put a quick plug for Best Hour, which is for any affiliate owner that's out there. I don't get any kickback on this, but like Brad said, I've been a coach now for a while, but we've also enrolled Tilt into the Best Hour curriculum, and Best Hour was the missing piece for us. And the things that I've enjoyed the most, Brad, are like connecting with you in person, as well as our small group calls, which is like something that I love the most, or the 2-year call. But the thing that Tilt was missing was the framework that Best Hour laid out for us. And that's the thing that gives me the confidence that there is so much more that I don't know. And I love, that's the thing that I think will continue to spur the curiosity, is that, even connecting with you at the mastermind, and now here we are recording a podcast, it just continues to fuel the fire to have just conversations with everybody. And that's actually something I said to everybody at the mastermind as they're, people starting gyms and doing that other stuff, is that every conversation that you have is a really great conversation to have, and that there are always things to pull from those conversations. And it's always better to have the conversation than to not, in like every aspect of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that. And it's great to hear that regardless of what level your gym's at, there's always a new level to unlock. There's always some people out there who are doing something a little bit better, a little bit smarter, and you can learn from them. Certainly appreciate that. And I love hearing your perspective, and looking forward to having you back on the intro and dropping some more episodes for folks out there in the community who enjoy that podcast. But thanks so much for jumping on with me today. Really enjoyed learning a little bit more about your story, and I'm excited to see how you continue to help gyms and other coaches out there continue to get better in this space.
Brad, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.